Paul.
Welcome to St. Mary's Big Book Step Study of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'd like to open this meeting with a moment of silence, followed by the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Lynn, could you read the preamble?
I'm Lynn, I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Lynn.
AA Preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. Well, again, my name is Paul, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Paul.
Hi, Paul.
The purpose of this particular meeting is really to go through the 12 steps of AA out of the Big Book. It's basically giving an example of at least this alcoholic, how I would take a sponsee through the Big Book, and the way that I'm taking a sponsee through the Big Book is the way that my sponsor took me through the Big Book. Father Joe did that number 24 hours ago, and up to this particular point, we've covered the doctor's opinion. We gave a history of AA in the forward, and that we've pretty well completed step one, and now we're right into there is a solution. So now we're up to page 25 of the Big Book. And as we had mentioned, that all of the evidence that has been presented to us in the Big Book, that as far as our malady, both spiritual, physical, emotional, mental, that now that we've been pretty well informed in that portion, now we end up jumping into really step two. If you were to try to wean out where do we begin talking about step two, here it is. So basically, what we'll do, it'll just be more of a read and reflect.
So that's open.
This is open.
Sure.
Your name on it.
So beginning on page 25, first paragraph. There is a solution. Almost none of us like self-searching, the leveling of our pride, the confession of shortcomings, which the process requires for successful consummation. But we saw that it really worked in others, and we had to come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it. When therefore we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved, there was nothing left for us but to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. We have found much of heaven, and we have been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence which we had not even dreamed. Pretty powerful testimony in that particular paragraph. And they mentioned about the self-searching, that's going to be where we're going to lead off there as far as defining the solution will be the self-searching. And that they're really pointing to the rest of the steps that we're going to have to be able to practice in order to be able to find the solution. But like here, as it's talking about that none of us like the self-searching and the leveling of our pride, that really this is frightening. It's frightening to all of us. But what we're going to end up finding out is that what we have to do is look for courage. And the way that we look for courage is to look to a higher power. Simple as that. Seems overwhelming, Seems like something that, boy, I guess only people that could live in monasteries or something like that, or somewhere secluded from, my day-to-day, would be able to do these things. But what they're really going to say is that here it is, and they lay it down for us too. That just by evidence that we'd seen people that had recovered among ourselves using these spiritual tools that had put at our feet, that they were able to find recovery. And here's one of the greatest testimony, this too, and this is witnessed again, as we know that these authored, by the first 100 AAs. The great fact is just this, and nothing less, that we have had a deep and effective spiritual experiences which has revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and toward God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way in which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do for ourselves. So there's the simple solution. Pretty much nails it right there, that's the revolutionary approach that we took here, and it revolutionized our whole attitude toward life. How could I change my attitude? That just seemed absolutely impossible. I didn't know that that could occur. But by these spiritual experiences, and by that what we're just saying is, okay, is how we've been able to come to them to practice the spiritual experience, that psychic change through those spiritual experiences. And that the spiritual experiences are always going to occur if I just simply am willing for it to happen and desire it. Just seek Him. That's all I got to do. Just seek. So they go on, they said, if you are seriously alcoholic as we, and believe that there is no middle-of-the-road solution, we are in a position where life was becoming impossible. If we had passed into the region from which there was no return through human aid. We go back to step one again. Find out that I have a particular illness too that is beyond human aid. It will not be solved by human aid. Dr. Young will not be able to talk me into getting sober. Or anyone. It's just not going to happen. There has to be a power greater than myself. And what we found is that we had to have a spiritual solution, a spiritual experience in order for that to occur. So they keep, reiterating these things too. Beyond human aid. We had but two alternatives. One was to go to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could, and the other was to accept spiritual help. I didn't know there was an alternative. I myself, when I hit my bottom, that I knew I was going to be going to the bitter end, and I felt that, okay, my only solution was, number one, leave the house, leave my family, stop the obvious hurting, drink myself to death in a cheap motel. That was option one. And somehow I made a prayerful petition to my higher power to look for a spiritual solution, and a miracle began to occur. But I didn't know that, that was going to be the real key. It certainly gave me the peace and the certainty that I was going to be okay when I made that surrender. But I never knew that was, you know what, Paul? What happened that night, that's exactly what has to occur. I have to be able to find a way that I can experience my higher power that is personal and profound, that'll change the way that I am going to go forward and continue to accept that grace, to allow God to come in without any sort of trying to sort it out or just say, or any particular conditions. Let it happen. Okay. We go on. This we did honestly. This we did because we honestly wanted to and were willing to make the effort. Now we get into Roland Hazard's story. We covered that pretty well earlier when we go into the fourth step there too, when we go into the history of AA. How Roland Hazard, the industrialist, his family was making a fortune over in South County. That he, was in his 30s there, was just drinking himself to death. He was a hopeless alcoholic. And he had all the money in the world to be able to seek the, knowing that it was probably centered in the mind, or he knew there was something emotional and all that he decided to seek out the best psychiatric help that he could. So he knew that the center of it, at least as far as psychology, was in Zurich, Switzerland. Okay. And he knew that that Sigmund Freud was there, and he was going to start at the top, and he was all booked. And then he said, okay, who's your next second command? And he says, this guy Adler, Dr. Adler. So he books it with Adler, and Adler tells him on his way over that I don't have time for you. I'm going to send you to my associate, Dr. Young. New guy in the practice, pretty bright. We kind of like him, so meet with him. So he was being treated by Dr. Young for over a year. And when he came back to the doctor at this particular point, which we're going to be reading through in here, is that this is the time, when after he's thought that he was cured after all of this sort of treatment And it's just like I would figure it would be too. If I had all the sort of counseling there too, and I hadn't been drinking during that particular period, I figured I was probably pretty cured. But on his way back, he had a layover, gets into a bar, and all of a sudden someone says, "You want a drink?" And he said yes. No compulsion at all to be able to say, "Hey, wait a minute, at least to be able to say, I'm on a streak here, how many days?" I would think of it in those terms, just playing a lot of baseball. But he said absolutely no compulsion, and then he was off to the races. And he comes back to Dr. Young, a broken man. Okay. So why don't we continue with that? So, Lynn, could you read the next couple of paragraphs here?
Sure. A certain American businessman had ability, good sense, and high character. For years he had floundered from one sanitarium to another. He had consulted the best-known American psychiatrists. Then he had gone to Europe, placing himself in the care of a celebrated physician, the psychiatrist Dr. Young, who prescribed for him. Though experience had made him skeptical, he finished his treatment with unusual confidence. His physical and mental condition were unusually good. Above all, he believed he had acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. Nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time. More baffling still, he could give himself no satisfactory explanation for his fall. So he returned to this doctor, whom he admired, and asked him point blank why he could not recover. He wished above all things to regain self-control. He seemed quite rational and well-balanced with respect to other problems. Yet he had no control whatever over alcohol. Why was this? Want to read? He begged.
You want to continue? Yeah. Continue.
Me? Okay.
You want me to?
Sure.
Yes.
Wait, why don't you
Thank you.
continue? Sure.
I'm losing my voice.
He begged the doctor to tell him the whole truth,
Thank God.
and he got it. In the doctor's judgment, he was utterly hopeless. He could never regain his position in society, and would have to place himself under lock and key or hire a bodyguard if he expected to live long. That was a great physician's opinion. But this man still lives and is a free man. He does not need a bodyguard, nor is he confined. He can go anywhere on this earth where other free men may go without disaster, provided he remains willing to maintain a certain simple attitude.
Okay, why don't you stop right there? Okay, as we can see here, what particularly that last paragraph on page 26 there, begging the doctor for the truth. And Young, in all of his humility, tell him that you're utterly hopeless. He could have strung this guy out for years for treatment, Let's try it again. You learn your lesson now. I guess maybe you won't have that blind spot, but he just said, no, you're utterly hopeless. An alcoholic of your type. Utterly hopeless. In other words, I can't help you. Science can't help you. There's no pill for this. He was trying to, even moral psychology, he was trying on him for a whole year. And that's just simply by saying, when are you going to behave, Paul? When are you going to grow up? That sort of stuff. You know what's right and wrong. Just damn do it, will you? Okay. And that's what Young had been trying on him for a year. Now, how did that work out? Here he is back a broken man. Now, this is really key, and this is what I think is one of the miracle of AA that had occurred here. That here's this guy that's in this sort of position there too, okay? And he's going to a psychiatrist, world-renowned and all of a sudden. He's saying, guess what? My profession has no answer for you. Okay? You're going to put yourself under lock and key. I don't think Sigmund Freud would have said that. I don't think his cohort, Dr. Adler, would say that way, okay? Because they were materialists, all right? They had no thought at all about spiritual life, okay? None whatsoever. In fact, they were just really practicing atheists, okay? And here, just by chance, okay, by cancellation, who does Roland fall into the lap of? Dr. Young, who was humble enough to recognize, guess what, but he was able to see, just by experience and people that he'd seen, there have been spiritual experiences. Okay. So why don't we continue? Some of our alcoholic readers may think they can do without spiritual help. But let's tell you the rest of the conversation our friend had with the doctor. And this is where it's so powerful. I mean, my God, I can imagine going to a doctor and having him just sit down and looking at you right in the eye and say that to me. I mean, I've been, lying to, physicians for years about my drinking and everything else. But if they ever caught wind of the fact that I was indeed, an alcoholic, this would knock me on my pins. He said, the doctor said, you have had the mind of a chronic alcoholic. I have never seen one single case recover where that state of mind existed to the extent that it does in you. Okay? Our friend felt as though the gates of hell had closed on him. He said to the doctor, is there no exception? And is the humility? Yes, the doctor said, there is. Exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. To me, these occurrences are a phenomena. That means he really can't explain it. We can see it, we can sense it, but we have no real explanation for it. They appear to be in nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes which were once the guiding force of the lives of these men are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. In fact, I've been trying to produce such an emotional rearrangement within you. With many individuals, the methods which I employed are successful, but I have never been successful with an alcoholic of your description. Ain't gonna work, okay? Like I said, the moral psychology, that wasn't gonna work, okay? But somehow they had these spiritual experiences. So upon hearing this, our friend was somewhat relieved, for he reflected, after all, he was a good church member. This hope, however, was destroyed by the doctors telling him that while his religious convictions are very good, in his case, they did not spell the necessary vital spiritual experience. That floored me, I figured that if I went back to church and lit a few candles, offered it up, that might just be enough. And here's what he's saying, and he's trying to say, okay, well, I could make sure I go to church on Sunday and just maybe practice my faith to a certain extent. But that's not the solution that he's talking about. He says, no, that's not even going to be sufficient. Not for an alcoholic of your type. And my sponsor, Father Joe, he was very insistent on that point there too, because that is why he insisted that I end up going to get the vital spiritual experience of the 12 steps of AA, and don't get sidetracked by religion at that point. At least to get the traction going, to be able to have that vital spiritual experience. In other words, get personal with God. How can I best get personal with God? He said, I can do it in combination, but make sure that I'm attending to this itself. Okay? Don't get sidetracked with other types of things, at least as we go through this first pass. Then after that, then you can start filling in, because you're going to look at religion with a whole different pair of glasses. Simple as that. If I go in there swinging, all I'm going to be talking about is resentments of this and resentments of that and all that type of stuff. And I haven't even begun the process of doing the steps. I was able to reconcile with my faith and the religion that I was raised with after the 4th and 5th step. Gave me a path completely. Institutions I have a problem with? Yeah, let's list it, okay? Let's get right down to it. Okay, what else? And what person and all this type of stuff. I get through all that type of stuff, but it was important because I would have just felt, okay, just ramp it up and make sure you go to Mass on Sunday. And here's Dr. Young telling this guy, that ain't going to be enough. That's not going to solve it for him. You need a vital spiritual experience. So, he's been told the solution. We had Dr. Silkworth up to this point tell us the problem. But here's Dr. Young unwittingly giving us the real solution. And only because he's just passing on, because he's seen this occur. And he's not going to BS it or say, boy, that might shut down my trade. People start running off of vital spiritual experiences, we'll be out of business. Well, any of that nonsense. Thank God we didn't have an atheist that Roland went to. Or maybe the whole thing just wouldn't occur, I don't know. But I just see that sort of miracle, sort of occurring, that Dr. Young was able to do that. And I think we ended up mentioning, we had a letter there too that Dr. Young was writing back when Bill Wilson asked him to be able to reflect on what the conversation was all about, talk about vital spiritual experiences. And we read that in one of the earlier sessions there too, and I'll get a copy to you if you like it. But it's very important, that he just said that, how can you talk about this stuff? I wanted to tell him, yeah, you got to get some vital spiritual experience, but shit, how do you talk in those words? How do you talk in language of the heart? I'm just a doctor and a lay person. How do I talk about spiritual things? So it wasn't like, he came back and said, okay, Dr. Young, what do you do? Do you have a vital spiritual experience? It wasn't in that sort of conversation. But Dr. Young, reflected too that it was difficult for him to be able to respond in any other way than the way that he did, and to keep it as short as he did too. But just say, you got to find it, Roland. You got to find it. Let's see. Okay, so here the terrible dilemma in which our friend, on page 28, the terrible dilemma in which our friend found himself when he had the extraordinary experience, which, as we have already told you, made him a free man. A lot in that paragraph is not being mentioned in detail, but essentially what occurred was that Roland ended up finding out about the Oxford group, which is a group of people trying to practice first century Christianity, okay, and having just certain absolutes of honesty, purity, purity of heart, and that they were going to be able, and that they had a particular, goal that ended up becoming really the root of the 12 steps that we had. But that's basically what he had, and Roland was able to have a spiritual experience, hanging out with the Oxford group. Okay, so the next paragraph. We in turn sought some escape from the desperation of drowning men, but what seemed at first flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. A new life has been given us, or, if you prefer, a design for living that really works. Okay, the distinguished American psychologist William James, in his book Variety of Spiritual Experiences, indicates a multiple of ways in which men have discovered God. We have no desire to convince anyone that there is only one way by which faith can be acquired. If what we have learned and felt and seen means anything at all, it means that all of us, whatever our race, creed, or color, are children of the living Creator with whom we may form a relationship upon simple and understandable terms as soon as we are willing and honest enough to try. Pretty easy prescription. All I have to do is become, willing and honest enough to try. It's non-denominational. It's a guarantee to everyone in the room, regardless of your background. Those having religious affiliations will find that there is nothing disturbing to their beliefs or ceremonies. There is no friction among us that matters. Because simply what AA, what the spiritual journey is all about, is just for me to be able to have a personal relationship with a God of my understanding, however I define that God or however I relate to it. My understanding is how we get along. Do we talk? Don't we? If we do I only talk, when I'm in the trenches? Do I talk on Thursdays and Fridays? When I talk, do we really talk? Am I building a relationship, or is it very spotty? Do I take quiet time just to be alone, just so that that can occur? That perhaps this higher power can communicate with me? Just rest my mind? Those sort of things? That's the type of spirituality that they're talking about in AA, so that once I be able to get that sort of relationship, that all of a sudden, now I have for me, it's a personal God. How that relates to me personally. That's understandable. Doesn't mean I understand everything about God. That's impossible, because I'm finite and He's infinite. Okay? But I can have a relationship that can occur, that we can have a relation that He ends up being able to come into my life and heal me of this illness and everything about me and all my relationships and all those sort of things. So what they're talking about is like, you know, the variety of spiritual experiences where they're saying to be able to come to that sort of thing. It's like what William James was saying. He's seen it happen from people from all different creeds, but there was 3 key elements. Okay, there has to be a calamity in my life. That I know this for sure, certain, okay? I'm in a lot of shit. All right? Then I have to admit that I'm utterly defeated. Utterly defeated. The admission of utter defeat. And then the last step is just turn to a power greater than myself. Turn to God in some, whatever feeble way it might be. You know? That's all. And what he found is that those 3 key elements, if that occurs, okay, a spiritual experience occurs. Okay? And what it guarantees me that I have at least one conversation with my higher power when that occurs. I've had at least one conversation. And I remember that first conversation when I surrendered. Okay? Because I spoke and then I heard. Somehow I heard. You know, Paul, you're going to be all right. You made the right decision. Thank your mother. You know? But I knew. You know? I knew. So that's what they're talking about. So that's what at first I'm so stunned, like how quickly all this stuff kind of cascaded. It was only like a few weeks, something like that, before, you know, from Roland up to Ebby, then Ebby down to Bill. I mean, we're talking just weeks' time. We're not talking about months and months. You know, a domino. How quickly that occurred. You know? And so that's what they're explaining to me. They're just saying, hey, Paul, remember when you had your bottom? You reached out to God and you had a relationship and you surrendered? You know, you had your first spiritual experience. Welcome. Keep it up. Keep talking to him. Whatever that power might be. Even if you say you're cloudy or, you know, however it's strained it might be and all that other type of stuff. You know, I didn't know that, but thank God that, you know, it occurred. So I guess when I ended up, you know, coming to that sort of understanding, I knew for certain I had a seat here at AA. You know? What you people were talking about and these sort of things that they were being laid out to me had occurred in my life. I knew it from experience. It wasn't just say, okay, Paul, here's what you got to do, you know? Just like, I'll never forget my friend Kevin, when Father Joe first started coming around, and he ended up going to one of Father Joe's step studies. And he ended up going through the doctor's opinion. This guy Kevin had probably been sober about 5 or 6 years or so. Pretty good sobriety. Chasing AA, going to a lot of meetings and all that, practicing the steps. But he never knew what the problem was because he never read the doctor's opinion. You know, it wasn't chapter 1. It was italics, you know. And when it was explained to him in certain terms, okay, about the malady and the phenomenon of craving that he had never heard before, he walked out of that room just like I did when I heard that message. Oh, thank God. So that's it. So I am really sick. Oh shit! Okay, what do I got to do? You know? I never knew. And I'll never forget him. We were over at St. Dominic's Church, you know, over on Route 6 there too. And he was coming out there, just tears in his eyes. Joe, I never knew, you know. I've been sober for 6 or 7 years. I've been battling all this type of stuff, you know. And I'm just saying, okay, yeah, you give me all the evidence I am, okay. But my head and my heart didn't take it in, you know. And then you read that. Oh, you know. And it's the same thing that occurred with Dr. Bob when Bill showed up. He'd been trying to practice the principles of the Oxford group. He'd already joined. He had the people praying over him, you know, to relieve him of his alcoholism. But he never knew what the real problem was. And when Bill told him of the problem that he heard from Dr. Silkworth, then he could practice those principles with a vigor that he never knew before. And he never had a drink except for one exception. Pretty amazing, you know, pretty simple. So the spirituality, it screams, you know, out of here. And it's just so encompassing, the hoop is so wide here that I don't have to get into discussion. They say, well, you don't have to really get down to the real details, you know, of my, you know, of the belief system there. All I have to do is continue to be able to reach to this higher power, this power greater than myself. So, I think that covers that chapter. We've gone for about a half hour. Any comment about what we've just spoken about so far before we go on to the next chapter, more of alcoholism?
On page page 27, it says willing to maintain a certain simple attitude, but I'm not clear on what that certain simple attitude is.
To do the work.
Oh,
Well, it's really to do the work. It's really what
that's
they're
what it means,
inferring,
certain
yeah.
simple attitude?
Simple attitude. I'm willing.
Okay.
It would really be a willingness. Anyone have a different view?
That's simple.
I never knew that, and you talk about, that vital spiritual experience, I mean, how that, it just kind of cascades. That once that occurs, and Joe would also say, like, once you get through the third step, I'm hand in hand with a giant. That all that other stuff that I got to do, whether it be the inventory or trying to look for truth or whatever it might be, is so much easier now. Now it can happen. All those sort of things that will be able to occur. Tom?
No, go ahead.
No, I'm done.
Oh no, I just like what you said. Is what if Young was a atheist?
Mm.
I don't think. I think in God's plan and everything, that's not a possibility. Even if he was, he said, wondered if he would come back. If it would happen, the whole movement would happen.
Would it happen? Well, would it
Yeah,
even be
that was interesting
who
that
was
you
going
said
to tip
that.
him off as a vital spiritual experience?
Because
know?
I think that I think that would happen.
Yeah.
Either way,
Yeah.
if he was atheist.
Yeah.
Or,
I mean, would have thought that Jung's reluctance to be able to talk about spiritual matters would have been the fact that because he was a doctor, okay, and he'd probably say that's not really appropriate. That's not my field.
That was interesting.
But to be able to have that, to be able to have sort of the humility. But again, you got a guy that's desperate. This guy he wants it, man. He doesn't want to go home and be locked up. I guess I can tell him, outside the office, I've seen people, or even in the office, people have come to me that they had that vital spiritual experience, and all of a sudden, boom, the attitudes and
From a scientific point of view, he sees some things did work.
That's right.
And,
It's like
even if it is something.
exactly. It's like they say, it's a phenomena.
And you
To
also-
me, these occurrences are phenomena. That's what he's trying to say. I don't understand it. All I can do is testify that it occurred. Okay, that's all.
But Jung explored spirituality with other religions, Hindu, Buddhism.
Yeah, no, he looked at it other
Yeah.
ways too.
Symbolism of dreams,
Yeah.
so that's why he was
Yeah.
aware of the fact
He's
that
working
Yeah.
out other
happening since early times.
Well, it's early times too. You just go way back. Oh yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
early
Yeah.
Christianity, all the way down the line.
Yeah.
These things have occurred. And the interesting part about it is that the 12 steps that end up developing out of this thing is the solution, the spiritual solutions, so that someone can be able to have an easy outline or an entryway to find the vital spiritual experience. Are very much, like even the spiritual exercises of Saint Ignatius. Part and parcel. But they just fell into it. They had no idea about that. Going into this writing, or at least build it.
And in a way, Jung was telling him to find the God of his own experience.
Yeah, in other words, find some place where people are getting around to find God.
Which was really
So it could have been Pentecostal. I don't know.
What other God can
You
you,
know?
find? Except the God of your own
Yeah,
experience.
right,
Yeah.
but
Right?
Exactly.
but that Jung had the sense to say, I'm not going to tell you who, but go find them.
Right. But basically, what he was going to do is find some place where he could have that vital spiritual experience. So he knew he had to associate himself with people that were trying to be able to find God in a very mature way. Okay, and what it was is even the Oxford group. Okay, this guy had money. Okay, people in the Oxford group, most of them had money. It was started by people with money, and they had very firm, altruistic. Let's see if we can clean up society. It's just by our own example. I mean, that's how serious they were about it. At that particular time when he gravitated to it, and they were doing tremendous work. The only reason that it ended up just going away was the fact that it became politicized later on. Someone started talking about their particular social view and things like that, and they got off the spiritual type of deal. That's the only reason it failed. But this was sort of a natural type of thing that was causing miracles. And here he fell right into it. Any other question? Okay, the chapter more about alcoholism. this is really this particular chapter. If you would, I would probably term it as being it lays out the second step. What it does is it tries to be able to explain to me about the mental obsession, and it does it even by example. It's going to show us 3 particular alcoholics and going to try to examine their mind before they pick up that first drink. Let's see if there's something we can say about that, and see if we can learn from that to be able to identify this mental obsession. Okay. Because then once we be able to see that, okay, we can say that their behavior, each and every one of them, that's insane. That's insane. And by saying is you do nutty things, okay, it means that you don't see the truth. The reality is not being comprehended here. Well, if it is, it's being pushed away, that's for sure. Okay? But that's insane. So this is what, now we get into more about alcoholism. Okay, now they've kind of laid out pretty much, you got to have the vital spiritual experience. We told you about the illness, okay, and now we're going to get into the second step. But the first thing we got to figure, if I find out that my condition is that I'm insane, then I know I need help. Okay, I'm not going to be able. A sick mind is not going to heal a sick mind, and that's what we're going to end up seeing here. Okay. So, would anyone like to begin with the this paragraph, page 30, more about alcoholism? Vincent?
Sure.
Thanks.
Most of us have been unwilling to admit we were real alcoholics. No person likes to think he is bodily and mentally different from his fellows. Therefore, it is not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove we could drink like other people. The idea that somehow, someday, he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we are like other people, or presently may be, has to be smashed. We alcoholics are men and women who have lost the ability to control our drinking. We know that no real alcoholic ever recovers control. All of us felt at times that we were regaining control, but such intervals, usually brief, were inevitably followed by still less control, which led in time to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. We are convinced to a man that alcoholics of our type are in the grip of a progressive illness. Over any considerable period, we get worse, never better.
We'll stop right there. Thanks, Vincent. Okay, a lot in those 2 paragraphs, the 3 paragraphs. Again, as we're talking about, and let's define the terms we're talking about, insanity, okay, we're talking about wholeness of mind, okay, seeing the truth. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about the behaviors or the stupid things that we did when we were drinking or wanting to drink. Yeah.
I'm just starting out, and I'm kind of going right now through the recovery process at Roger Williams. And I probably heard the best definition of insanity, and I've kind of really put it to heart, is repeating the same steps over and over and expecting a different result.
That's right.
That's
That's a very
like,
apt.
I can do this again. I can be better at this one. I can do it all over.
That's right.
I can
That's right.
control it.
That's right. So obviously, I'm not seeing the truth about it. I'm not seeing the truth about that action.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or not does it even occur to me that I failed before? Why did I think it's going to happen, right? As we do here. But as they talk about, so that's, and they talk about that we pursue this to the gates of insanity or death. Boy, I knew it was a serious ride down when I was going with this illness in the throes of it. But I didn't know that the end line was going to be insanity or death. I had no idea. I just figured there's going to be a particular time in my drinking career where I'd moderate out for some particular reason and this wouldn't occur. I had no idea this was the trajectory of this alcoholic. You know, that great obsession of every abnormal drinker. Okay. So it talks about, we have to fully concede to our innermost selves that we are alcoholics. And that delusion that we could drink like other people had to be smashed. Just put it off the table, Paul. Don't even think about it. Don't even, well, what if? Stop. Don't even talk about it. Let's talk about other things for now. Okay? So about, can I drink light beer? Stop. Let's go over it. Let's talk about sobriety. Let's talk about the solution. Okay? Let's get on our knees. Okay? let's start working toward the solution. Let's go to the light. Stop with that type of stuff, okay? So that delusion had to be smashed. And it was for me. You know, as soon as I figured out, as soon as I heard, okay, the doctor's opinion when they described the illness to me, that's all it took for me to kind of jump on the other side. That's it. I'm in. You know? Because I knew for certain that I was sick. So whatever they're going to describe, and I knew that the people that were reading this to me, my sponsor particularly, and so many others in these halls, okay, that they had what I wanted. And they had the same illness that I had. Okay? And they were doing the things that were here. They weren't arguing with anything in here. They said, "Oh, that's interesting that Bill felt that way." But I have a kind of a different view. You know, everything here that I can't be able to reconcile by my own experience, all I can say is it's a yet. It's a definite yet. You know, like Mother Angelica would often say, you know, some of us are good because of lack of opportunity. You know? And so it has been with me. You know. Okay. Okay, and then the next line there, we are like men who have lost their legs. They never grow new ones. There's no turning back. Yeah. So I knew that after I read this, you know, with Father Joe, it was like, okay, don't even bring that up. You know, the whys are, will there be a time and all that stuff. Stop romanticizing about the drink and start working on the solution. We have men that have lost their legs. We don't grow new ones. That's pretty certain. So don't even entertain it. I'm not going to pick up, you know, a section of the Boston Globe and say, "Oh, they found a cure." You know, I ain't looking for it. You know, I'm going to go right to this, because what I found too was that it wasn't just the drink that was being removed. The drink problems being removed. These people had a way of living, of looking at everything in their life with truth. You know, and calm. You know, and you think, how can you do that? And you hear some of the backstories about them, the tragedies that were going on before they came into AA and since they came into AA. And yet they were still like a rock, you know? You say, oh my God, I didn't know people lived that way. And the humility, they weren't bragging, you know? More often than not, they were just talking about how wounded they were, you know? And how grateful they were that all the good things had occurred in their lives since they found God here in AA. You know, what a blessing. Yeah. So why don't we turn over to page 32? As you can see, when I go through some of the steps here, I find that's, well, the next number of pages I have pretty well outlined, so we're going to cover most of them. But occasionally what you find is that you kind of just skip over some of this information here to be able to continue the point about the steps. So why don't we just jump right into the first example that we're going to have of the alcoholic, the mind of the alcoholic, and when we start on the middle of page 32. You want to read?
Sure. A man of 30 was doing a great deal of spree drinking. He was very nervous in the morning after these bouts and acquired himself with more liquor. He was ambitious to succeed in business, but saw that he could get nowhere if he drank at all. Once he started, he had no control whatever. He made up his mind that until he had been successful in business and had retired, he would not touch another drop. An exceptional man, he remained bone dry for 25 years and retired at the age of 55 after a successful and happy business career. Then he fell victim to a belief which practically every alcoholic has, that his long period of sobriety and self-discipline had qualified him to drink as other men. Out came his carpet slippers and a bottle. In 2 months he was in a hospital, puzzled and humiliated. He tried to regulate his drinking for a while, making several trips to the hospital meantime. Then, gathering all his forces, he attempted to stop altogether, and found he could not. Every means of solving his problem, which money could buy, was at his disposal. Every attempt failed. Though a robust man at retirement, he went to pieces quickly and was dead within 4 years. This case contains a powerful lesson. Most of us have believed that if we remain sober for a long stretch, we could thereafter drink normally. But here is a man who at 55 years found he was just where he had left off at 30. We have seen the truth demonstrated again and again. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Commencing to drink after a period of sobriety, we're in a short time as bad as ever. If we are planning to stop drinking, there must be no reservation of any kind, nor any lurking notion that someday we will be immune to alcohol.
Great, thanks. Powerful witness, okay, and I'm grateful they included this, in this writing there. I mean, it's where they say that there's once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. That obsession of the mind for him to be able to pick up like that. I like that line, out came the bottle and the carpet slippers. I thought of that the day I retired a couple of months ago. I put my slippers away. But I could see that, I have no more responsibility. I don't have to do all that stuff, right? Life is going to be easy. I'll kick back and have a few drinks. I can manage this, I'll stay in line somehow. And even if I don't, so what? As long as I have a pension check. But, here he is, and then all of a sudden it's just total deterioration. And how many people that I've seen in AA, they talk about that experience there too. I didn't pick up where I left off. I picked up where I would have been if I continued to drink all that time when I was sober. That's how bad it was, within a nanosecond. Some people the first night, some they said, I picked it up, I went over to Agave, when it was the top sale. I'm trying to think, was it Carol? Topsider, was it? I think it was Carol talking about that. And I could just see her doing, and she's sitting there, and someone just said, why don't you have one? I've been sober for about, a couple of years and like that. Yeah, I guess I'll have one. And she figured pretty good about it, okay? And she didn't have a drink for a week, okay? And she picked up again, and she's off to the races. So it's absolutely scary, that here you see it, the craving kicked right in, and this guy was just off to the races. Like my friend TJ, he'd been in the halls of AA, I don't know, 12, 15 years. You remember him, Mike? TJ? Okay, and he goes over to Ireland. He gets a case of the hiccups. And they tell him, hey, TJ, the only way you could cure this one, because he'd had the hiccups for over 24 hours, right? I mean, a long time, okay? He couldn't sleep and all this stuff. He was desperate. And someone said to him, well, TJ, the way we get rid of it here is a glass of white wine. Got rid of the hiccups. Didn't come back to AA for another dozen years. Off to the races. Okay? He wasn't drinking for effect. Okay? But that's just how powerful it is. So that's why that's firewared me. I have no idea how hard that shade's going to come down once I pick up that drink. Am I going to walk away from my higher power and all that stuff completely? I don't know. Happened to TJ. So how powerful it was, for this particular man of 30, that he pulls out the bottle and the carpet slippers. And he's gone. Dead, Okay. Why don't we move on to the next page, 34. Middle of the page. For those who are unable to drink moderately, the question is how to stop altogether. We are assuming, of course, that the reader desires to stop. Whether such a person can quit upon a non-spiritual basis depends upon the extent to which he has already lost the power to choose and whether he will drink or not. Many of us have felt that we had plenty of character. There was a tremendous urge to cease forever, yet we found it impossible. This is the baffling feature of alcoholism as we know it, this utter inability to leave it alone no matter how great the necessity or the wish. I really thought that coming into AA that once I heard my problem and all that type of stuff, I was going to say, damn it, now I'm not going to do it anymore. To a certain extent, I could find myself drifting away from AA and say, you know what, spiritual way may be an option. As long as I know for certain that I am an alcoholic and I can't touch the stuff. That's poison for me. I'll do whatever I can, okay? That's self-knowledge here. But that's what they're saying here, that there was a tremendous urge to cease forever, yet we found it impossible. Okay? So they keep coming back again, How many of us that came in here and be able to start taking this track and we kind of ready to go off the rails like that, I think, we all kind of talked out the first and second step there too, but, I might be able to, just with the self-knowledge, I may be able to just stop and it won't be a problem. Okay, so now we're going to go to the next alcoholic. Okay, we're going to look at the mind of the alcoholic building up to that particular drink. Okay, page 35. Lynn, you want to pick up there?
Sure.
What sort of thinking?
Oh, what sort of thinking dominates an alcoholic who repeats time after time the desperate experiment of the first drink? Friends who have reasoned with him after a spree which has brought him to the point of divorce or bankruptcy are mystified when he walks directly into a saloon. Why does he? Of what is he thinking? Our first example is a friend we shall call Jim. This man has a charming wife and family. He inherited a lucrative automobile agency. He had a commendable World War record. He's a good salesman. Everybody likes him. He's an intelligent man, normal so far as we can see, except for a nervous disposition. He did no drinking until he was 35. In a few years, he became so violent when intoxicated that he had to be committed. On leaving the asylum, he came into contact with us. We told him what we knew of alcoholism and the answer we had found. He made a beginning, his family was reassembled, and he began to work as a salesman for the business he had lost through drinking. All went well for a time, but he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. To his consternation, he found himself drunk half a dozen times in rapid succession. On each of these occasions, we worked with him, reviewing carefully what had happened. He agreed he was a real alcoholic and in a serious condition. He knew he faced another trip to the asylum if he kept on. Moreover, he would lose his family, for whom he had a deep affection. Yet he got drunk again. We asked him to tell us exactly how it happened. This is his story. I came to work on Tuesday morning. I remembered I felt irritated that I had to be a salesman for a concern I once owned. I had a few words with the boss, but nothing serious. Then I decided to drive into the country and see one of my prospects for a car. On the way, I felt hungry, so I stopped at a roadside place where they have a bar. I had no intention of drinking. I just thought I would get a sandwich. I also had the notion that I might find a customer for a car at this place, which was familiar, for I had been going to it for years. I had eaten there many times during the months I was sober. I sat down at a table and ordered a sandwich and a glass of milk. Still no thought of drinking. I ordered another sandwich and decided to have another glass of milk. Suddenly, the thought crossed my mind that if I were to put an ounce of whiskey in my milk, it couldn't hurt me on a full stomach. I ordered a whiskey and poured it into the milk. I vaguely sensed I was not being any too smart, but felt reassured as I was taking the whiskey on a full stomach. The experiment went so well that I ordered another whiskey and poured it into more milk. That didn't seem to bother me, so I tried another. Thus started one more journey to the asylum for Jim. Here was the threat of commitment, the loss of family and position, to say nothing of that intense mental and physical suffering which drinking always caused. He had much knowledge about himself as an alcoholic, yet all reasons for not drinking were easily pushed aside in favor of the foolish idea that he could take whiskey if only he mixed it with milk. Keep going.
Just one more paragraph.
Okay. Whatever the precise definition of the word may be, we call this plain insanity. How can such a lack of proportion of the ability to think straight be called anything else?
Thanks, Lynn. Powerful story about Jim. Boy, I feel like I'm back at that night down at Columban Fathers reading this thing the first time. I can remember the first thing Joe said to me after I read this. We read through this thing. He said, Paul, turn to page 35, that last paragraph. What do you see there? I said, well, we told him we knew about alcoholism, the answer we had found. He says, what does that tell you? So he was introduced to steps 1 and 2. He made a beginning. Step 3. His family was reassembled. Okay? So he's doing the 3-step waltz, right? Began working as a salesman, and he had lost through, drinking, okay? He's reassembled, okay, but he sees the damage, okay? I no longer own this agency. Now I'm just a salesman. Okay? He's probably resentful for that. There's got to be a few other things here, okay? But here's the real crusher. He went for a time, but he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. How could Jim have enlarged his spiritual life? Continuing with the steps. Move on to 4 and 5. But he stopped. Okay? So early on, it's proved to me that grow or you go. It's not going to. I cannot stand, on this one step here. I got to continue. At least be willing to begin to grow. Okay. Goes on to page 36. He says, "Okay." They say here, "Okay, here's a story. I came to work on Tuesday." And Joe said, "What happened to Monday?" Little details there. I remember feeling irritated that I had to be a salesman. Right? There we go. That resentment kind of burning, right? I'm out of here. I'm going to go out into the country. See if I can find someone to sell a car to. Right? But what it is, okay, he's in an insane position at this particular point. He's not seeing the truth about himself, really, at this point. He's set up. Okay? Then he goes to that bar, and suddenly the thought crossed my mind that if I were to put an ounce of whiskey in my milk, it wouldn't hurt me on a full stomach. Right? Out of the blue. Right? Out of the blue. Family reassembled, got a job, that type of stuff. Out of the blue. No intention walking in, okay? And then the insane idea, okay? And how can he combat that insane idea? He has no way. He doesn't have a way. He doesn't have a higher power at that moment, okay? He's stalled out, okay? And he's off to the races, So again, it gets back to this thing that they talk about in that page 37. Whatever the precise definition of the word might be, we call this plain insanity, okay? I can't see the whole thing. I can't see the truth, And he couldn't see the truth, but guess what, Jim? You can't have an ounce of whiskey. Sorry. It ain't going to happen. So, and again, as we see right here, too, it just shows once that insane idea occurred, it triggered the allergy, and he was off to the races, as he mentioned there. Keep him coming.
Can I just ask a question?
Yes.
Every time I read this, is whiskey and milk like a drink?
No.
Okay.
No.
I don't
I
know.
thought it sounded
No.
disgusting. I just didn't know if perhaps it was a drink that I wasn't aware of.
Was for him.
All right. So
Does sound like a good idea.
I just
What's eggnog with liquor?
brandy. And
Oh, is it brandy?
It's kind of a whiskey.
No, but I can understand that, though. Coat the stomach.
Yeah.
I remember eating yogurt when I went on a pub crawl one time in
Well,
college.
plus no one will notice if I'm drinking.
And we thought that was going to
Worked
help,
out
Yeah. So get a little dairy in there or something like that. That'll help you.
Plus no one will notice. If
And
I'm
no one will
drinking
notice. And no one will
milk,
notice, yeah. And that's the
then
other thing, too. They won't even
they're
know that
not
you're
gonna
drinking.
see the whiskey in it.
Yeah, someone come in and say, I thought you weren't drinking, right?
It's more like it.
Drink of justification. The name of the cocktail.
In a nanosecond. In a nanosecond.
the eggnog is after that because what's the base like? Is that brandy? And what's the? Is it based on cream?
Yeah. Yeah,
And
I mean,
nutmeg.
eggnog by itself is that, like,
Right.
Okay. Tom, you want to read a
I
couple
wish I
of
could have my eyes are
Your
big
eyes
on
on.
the sun all day.
Vincent, want to continue?
You may think. Okay, you
Yeah,
may-
page 37.
You may think we are this is you may think this is an extreme case. To us it is not far-fetched, for this kind of thinking has been characteristic of every single one of us. We have sometimes reflected more than Jim did upon the consequences. But there was always the curious mental phenomenon that parallel with our sound reasoning, there inevitably ran some insanely trivial excuse for taking the first drink. Our sound reasoning failed to hold us in check. The insane idea won out. Next day we would ask ourselves in all earnestness and sincerity how it could have happened. In some circumstances, we have gone out deliberately to get drunk, feeling ourselves justified by nervousness, anger, worry, depression, jealousy, or the like. But even in this type of beginning, we are obliged to admit that our justification for a spree was insanely insufficient in the light of what always happened. We now see that when we began to drink deliberately instead of casually, there was little serious or effective thought during the period of premeditation of what the terrific consequences might be. Our behavior is as absurd and incomprehensible with respect to the first drink as that of an individual with a passion, say, for jaywalking. He gets a thrill out of skipping in front of fast-moving vehicles. He enjoys himself for a few years in spite of friendly warnings. Up to this point, you would label him as a foolish chap having queer ideas of fun. Luck then deserts him and he is slightly injured several times in succession. You would expect him, if he were normal, to cut it out. Presently, he is hit again and this time has a fractured skull. Within a week after leaving the hospital, a fast-moving trolley car breaks his arm. He tells you he has decided to stop jaywalking for good, but in a few weeks he breaks both legs. On through the years, this conduct continues, accompanied by his continual promises to be careful or to keep off the streets altogether. Finally, he can no longer work, his wife gets a divorce, and he is held up to ridicule. He tries every known means to get the jaywalking idea out of his head. He shuts himself up in an asylum, hoping to amend his ways. But the day he comes out, he races in front of a fire engine, which breaks his back. Such a man would be crazy, wouldn't he? You may think our illustration is too ridiculous, but is it? We who have been through the ringer have to admit if we substituted alcoholism for jaywalking, the illustration would fit us exactly. However intelligent we may have been in other respects where alcohol had been involved, we had been strangely insane. It's strong language, but isn't it true? Some of you are thinking, yes, what you tell us is true, but it doesn't fully apply. We admit we have some of these symptoms, but we have not gone to the extremes you fellows did. Nor are we likely to, for we understand ourselves so well after what you have told us that such things cannot happen again. We have not lost everything in life through drinking, and we certainly do not intend to. Thanks for the information. That may be true of certain non-alcoholic people who, though drinking foolishly and heavily at the present time, are able to stop or moderate because their brains and bodies have not been damaged as ours were. But the actual or potential alcoholic, with hardly an exception, will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. This is a point we wish to emphasize and re-emphasize, to smash home upon our alcoholic readers as it has been revealed to us out of bitter experience. Let us take another illustration.
Okay, why don't we stop right there? Thanks. All right, that just pretty much just reiterates and puts more light on the fact that self-knowledge is not going to solve my problem. I'm not going to be able to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. Boy, I thought that, because there was such convincing information that I had received, in the doctor's opinion, that, when I walked out of that Edge Hill rehab up in Warwick that night, got to see Father Martin talking about it, and just feeling relieved, and by saying, okay, now I see what it is, it was almost like, okay, just, now just grow up and don't drink. I really thought that self-knowledge, would probably be able to solve it here too. And with the shown here by bitter experience, of these first 100, okay, that this is not going to occur. That self-knowledge, while important, okay, is not going to solve my problem. It can arrest it maybe perhaps for a particular period of time, but it's not going to solve my problem. Okay, I think we have time to do Fred, and that would knock off the, let's see. Yeah, why don't we just jump into Fred? We're going up to a quarter of, and we got another 12 minutes, I guess. Fasten your seatbelts. Okay, here we're going to talk about Fred. We're going to talk the mind of Fred, okay? So it's a number of body blows that are coming my way if I want to be able to rationalize the fact that I'm not an alcoholic. Because I could certainly identify with these particular people that he's really illustrated so far. The man of 30, picking up because he figured I'd been dry for a while. And then, of course, our friend Jim, who's probably the best story, I think, too, because he really nails it. He called him on his stuff. That he had a chance, okay, but he just wasn't following through. So now we'll just move on to Fred. So I want to read? Yeah, sure.
Fred is partner in a well-known accounting firm. His income is good, he has a fine house, is happily married and the father of promising children of college age. He has so attractive a personality that he makes friends with everyone. If ever there was a successful businessman, it is Fred. To all appearance, he is a stable, well-balanced individual, yet he is alcoholic. We first saw Fred about a year ago in a hospital where he had gone to recover from a bad case of the jitters. It was his first experience of this kind, and he was much ashamed of it. Far from admitting he was an alcoholic, he told himself he came to the hospital to rest his nerves. The doctor intimated strongly that he might be worse than he realized. For a few days he was depressed about his condition. He made up his mind to quit drinking altogether. It never occurred to him that perhaps he could not do so. In spite of his character and standing, Fred would not believe himself as an alcoholic, much less accept a spiritual remedy for his problems. We told him what we knew about alcoholism. He was interested and concerned that he had some of the symptoms, but he was a long way from admitting that he could do nothing about it himself. He was positive that this humiliating experience, plus the knowledge he had acquired, would keep him sober for the rest of his life. Self-knowledge would fix it. We heard no more of Fred for a while. One day we were told that he was back in the hospital. This time he was quite shaky. He soon indicated he was anxious to see us. The story he told us is most instructive, for here was a chap absolutely convinced he had to stop drinking. He had no excuse for drinking, who exhibited splendid judgment and determination in all of his other concerns, yet was flat on his back nevertheless. Let him tell you about it. I was much impressed with what you fellows said about alcoholism, and I frankly did not believe it would be possible for me to drink again. I rather appreciated your ideas about the subtle insanity which precedes the first drink, but I was confident it could not happen to me after what I had learned. I reasoned I was not so far advanced as most of you fellows, that I had been usually successful in licking my other personal problems, and then I would therefore be successful where you men had failed. I felt I had every right to be self-confident, that it would be only a matter of exercising my willpower and keeping on guard. In this frame of mind, I went about my business, and for a time all was well. I had no trouble refusing drinks, and began to wonder if I had not been making too hard work of a simple matter. One day I went to Washington to present some accounting evidence to a government bureau. I had been out of town before during this particular dry spell, so there was nothing new about that. Physically, I felt fine. Neither did I have any pressing problems or worries. My business came off well. I was pleased and knew my partners would be too. It was the end of a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon. I went to my hotel and leisurely dressed for dinner. As I crossed the threshold of the dining room, the thought came to me that it would be nice to have a couple of cocktails with dinner. That was all. Nothing more. I ordered a cocktail in my meal. Then I ordered another cocktail. After dinner, I decided to take a walk. When I returned to the hotel, it struck me a highball would be fine before going to bed, so I stopped into the bar and had one. I remember having several more that night and plenty next morning. I had a shadowy recollection of being in an airplane bound for New York and of finding a friendly taxicab driver at the landing field instead of my wife. The driver escorted me about for several days. I know little of where I went or what I said and did. Then came the hospital with unbearable mental and physical suffering. As soon as I regained my ability to think, I went carefully over that evening to Washington. Not only had I been off guard, I had made no fight whatsoever against the first drink. This time I had no thought of the consequences at all. I I commenced to drink as carelessly as though the cocktails were ginger ale. I remembered what my alcoholic friends had told me, how they prophesied that if I had an alcoholic mind, the time and place would come, I would drink again. They had said that though I did raise it, they had said that though I did raise a defense, it would one day give way before some trivial reason for having a drink. Well, just that did happen and more. For what I had learned of alcoholism did not occur to me at all. I knew from that moment that I had an alcoholic mind. I saw that willpower and self-knowledge would not help in those strange mental blank spots. I had never been able to understand people who said that a problem had them hopelessly defeated. I knew then it was a crushing blow.
Okay, stop there. Right, there's the mind of the alcoholic, coming in, Fred. What's interesting about this particular story, too, was that Fred is what we call a high-bottom drunk. He didn't lose everything when his illness kicked in, or when they end up hooking up with the fellows in AA. But they talk on page 39 at the bottom there. Fred would not believe himself an alcoholic, so he wouldn't take step 1, much less accept a spiritual remedy to his problem, which is step 2. So already we know that, okay, Fred, lots of luck, Maybe he's a hard drinker, I don't know. Periodic drinker, a bad stretch. But if he's a true alcoholic, he hadn't found the solution. And Fred was pretty well convinced that self-knowledge would fix it, because he saw where self-knowledge would fix his other problems. If I have a problem in a business relationship, I'm smart enough to figure out a way to fix it through knowledge. Okay? I don't need to ask God, how am I going to take care of this? Okay? So that they talk about here that that was his problem there too. And then as he talks about it, as I crossed the threshold of the dining room, the thought came to my mind it would be nice to have a couple of cocktails with dinner and then go to the hospital. That insane idea. But that's certainly what happened, because it triggered the allergy. And Fred just admitting that too. And how many times that was questions either put to me or I might have asked myself at the bottom of the page, the last paragraph. This time I had not thought of the consequences at all. Someone said, Paul, why'd you drink? I thought you weren't going to drink today. Why'd you? I don't know. It was in front of me. I just drank it. I thought we had already talked about this thing. You weren't going to drink today, or this weekend, or something like that. Or you're going to wait till something else, or whatever it might be. I don't know. Same way, as Roland, coming back from seeing Dr. Young. Someone just pushed a drink his way. Sure. Fired it right down. Okay, and as we go on to page 42, it's that first paragraph there, which says about maybe 6 lines down, I saw that willpower and self-knowledge would not help in those strange mental blank spots. And that's what we're talking about. The mental blank spot. Where all reasons to the contrary are pushed aside with that insane idea that this time I can drink in safety, or this time it doesn't apply. And he talks about, the reasons, that he would drink, for a nervous disposition or whatever it might be. I mean, I was just thinking about that, all those different reasons, I could convince myself, you're a little upset, you better have a drink, calm your nerves. Something's coming your way, something unexpected. Have a drink, calm your nerves. It's almost like, I have heartburn, okay, I'm going to take Rolaids. Sure, I still do that. But for me, that solution for that emotional turmoil or any of that type of stuff there too, I knew that alcohol was going to solve that one, or at least mute it to a certain extent. It's almost like taking, a cold medication. It's not going to cure the cold, but at least it's going to make you feel a little bit better than I did before I took the medication. And here it is. He's talking about, you've already been proved that that the physical allergies are going to kick in when you drink, and now the insane idea, kicks in. The insane idea. Maybe, I ought to have a cocktail with dinner. Nobody drinks on an empty stomach here. So. Jim had a sandwich with his milk and whiskey. Okay. Why don't we turn to page 43? We'll wrap it up here. Actually, why don't we just close off to the last paragraph here. Once more, the alcoholic at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first drink. Except in a few rare cases, neither he nor any human being can provide such a defense. His defense must come from a higher power. Okay? That's the assertion here by these alcoholics. And that's part of what they said is, to show you precisely how we have recovered. Okay? And that's what they're asserting here. So the rest of this book, okay, is to see is the fact that I can't heal a sick mind with a sick mind. I need a power greater than myself. So that's the way that I'm going to have to do it. So it opens the door, okay, for me at this particular point. And I think with that, I think we'll wrap it up. We'll pick up next week with the chapter to the agnostics. Thank everyone for their attention. Why don't we close with a prayer? Thanks.